The air hung heavy over blue horizon. Smoke from the extinguished blaze painted the sky in shades of gray and orange. The sweet, acrid scent of gunpowder lingered, a grim reminder of the recent battle. Bodies lay scattered across the ravaged landscape, friends and foes alike. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional sob or the clang of a shovel. The townsfolk moved like ghosts amongst the wreckage. They cleared debris, tended to the wounded, and prepared the dead for their final rest. Faces etched with exhaustion and grief, they worked with a quiet determination. The fight for Blue Horizon was over, but the struggle to rebuild had just begun. Hope flickered amidst the despair. The attack, though brutal and unexpected, had been repelled. Against overwhelming odds, the people of Blue Horizon had stood their ground and defended their way of life. They had tasted victory, but it was a bitter one, paid for in blood and sacrifice. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the devastated town, a sense of uneasy calm settled over Blue Horizon. The immediate threat had passed, but the scars of the battle ran deep. The townsfolk knew that life would never be the same again. They had stared into the abyss and emerged victorious, but at a terrible cost. The saloon, usually a haven of warmth and laughter, stood eerily quiet. A few lanterns flickered, casting dancing shadows on the scared faces of those gathered. The silence was thick with unspoken anxieties, the weight of their recent victory pressing down on them. Whispers, hushed and urgent, snaked through the room. The townsfolk exchanged uneasy glances, their faces betraying a mix of exhaustion, relief, and a growing suspicion. The attack had been swift and precise, too well coordinated to be a random act of violence. Someone had provided their enemies with information, someone they had trusted. The name on everyone's lips was Caleb, a trusted rancher and a close friend of the town's leader, Sheriff Thompson. Caleb, who had always been a pillar of the community, a man of unwavering loyalty and integrity. The accusation hung in the air, unspoken but palpable, casting a dark cloud over the fragile sense of relief.
Sheriff Thompson, his face etched with fatigue and a deep sense of betrayal, listened grimly as the whispers reached his ears. He had fought alongside Caleb for years, trusted him with his life. The mere thought of Caleb betraying them sent a chill down his spine. The weight of his responsibility pressed down on him. He knew that fear and suspicion could be as dangerous as any bullet. He had to get to the bottom of this, and fast. The fate of Blue Horizon and his friendship with Caleb hung precariously in the balance.
Caleb stood in the center of the saloon, his weathered face a mask of confusion and hurt. Around him, his friends and neighbors looked at him with a mixture of suspicion and accusation. Their gazes, once filled with respect and warmth, now felt like hot coals burning into his skin.
"Caleb," Sheriff Thompson's voice cut through the tense silence. His words were measured, his tone neutral, but the look in his eyes spoke volumes. It was the look of a man caught between loyalty and duty, friendship and justice. "We have reason to believe you might have helped our enemies."
The accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Caleb's gut clenched. He had known this was coming, had felt the suspicion gathering around him like a storm cloud. Still, hearing the words spoken aloud by the man he considered a brother felt like a physical blow.
"You think I betrayed you?" Caleb's voice was rough with emotion. He looked around at the faces he had known his entire life, the people he had fought alongside, the community he had called home for as long as he could remember. Their suspicion cut him deeper than any bullet ever could.
"We need answers, Caleb." Sheriff Thompson's voice was firm, but his eyes held a flicker of hope, a desperate plea for an explanation that would make sense of the unthinkable. "Tell us you didn't do this. Tell us we're wrong."
The weight of their gazes pressed down on Caleb. He knew anything he said could be used against him, but he also knew he owed it to them, to his friend, to himself, to tell his side of the story. Caleb drew a deep breath, the weight of their suspicion heavy on his chest. He had to tread carefully, tell his story without revealing too much. His family's safety depended on it.
"A few weeks ago," Caleb began, his voice raspy with disuse, "I was approached by a group of men. They knew about my family, my wife and children who live in the next town."
His words hung in the air, each one a heavy stone dropped into a still pond. He could see the understanding dawn on some faces, the flicker of suspicion replaced by a glimmer of empathy. He had never spoken about his family, had kept their existence a secret to protect them from the dangers that came with living in this untamed land.
They threatened them, Caleb continued, his voice breaking slightly. Said if I didn't do as they asked, they would hurt them.
His hands clenched into fists, the memory of the threat, the fear for his family still fresh and raw. A collective gasp went through the saloon. The townsfolk, hardened by years of hardship and violence, understood the power of such threats. They might be suspicious, but they were not heartless.
What did they ask of you? Sheriff Thompson's voice was barely a whisper, his eyes fixed on Caleb, searching for any sign of deceit. The fate of their friendship, and perhaps the town itself, hinged on the answer.